Right. Okay. I think I'll start. Can I just check that everybody can see that top slide moving? Because it's actually come up with an entirely different view, desktop view for me than I've seen before. So who knows what's going on? But anyway, as long as anybody can see it, we'll move forward. So welcome to this webinar to disseminate the findings of various research and development projects we've been completing within various UKRI funded projects. What we're going to do is really focus on experience from two gear projects and one clothing project. So we're going to uh, um, essentially go through two sets of 20-minute presentations, and there'll hopefully be enough time for discussion, question, Q&A and discussion at the end. So we're the Centre for Sustainable Design. It's set up in 1995 and based at the University of Creative Arts. And back in 21-22, we started to really look at sustainability and particularly circularity of cricket gear and clothing as the second largest sport. And since then, we've undertaken a whole series of research projects research and projects, both reviewing in a sense the market, but also developing some prototype products, gear and some prototype demonstration projects. Essentially, this has been disseminated through webinars. We've also developed a chapter that's gone into a book that was launched at Cambridge University, and we've taken out our activities into various events to disseminate things. The projects themselves, I won't go through the details of this, but effectively we've been looking at the gear and the clothing from a variety of different perspectives. So first project is within this particular project, we went out to there are several elements to this, and the first element to this was really going out to look at to explore issues in the supply chain, and we went out to northern India and Jalandhar. Generally speaking, 80 to 90, well, probably more than 90% of the cricket gear is produced in northern India and Pakistan. It's a bit less certain on clothing, but we, for example, visited the Golden Temple. We then went out and had a discussion with over 30 different organisations from a sporting goods manufacturers association in Jalandhar that included cricket, boxing, and all sorts of other sports. And there was generally a lot of interest around circularity, and particularly in the potential use of bio-based materials. We then visited FC Sondi, a relatively large producer of cricket gear that produced for the international market and also the UK market, third largest cricket exporter in India, have a partnership with New Balance and sponsor Joe Root, Jamie Smith, and Bryden Cass. And I believe they're involved in setting up a UK operation in collaboration with New Balance. They had a very impressive factory and an undertaking a series of environmental and social initiatives very much connected to their community. They highlighted that 80% of their operations are solar powered. They are always looking to improve the working conditions, which objectively speaking look very good lighting, music, and they formerly had a cricket ground within their factory area that was the Harbhajan Singh Academy, but due to Harbhajan moving more into politics, they decided to cease that. So our observation was well-organized assembly lines with process-specific quality checks, in-house testing, and well-organized documentation. FC Sunday produce up to 100 cricket bats a day using Malaysian cane and English willow, but also are now producing plastic bats for the Indian market in conjunction with Decathlon. Also, we got to look at the production lines for, as well as bats, for gloves and pads, and we're particularly interested in the gloves and the pads. And really, it highlighted, they're on the surface, one thinks of them, these items, as quite simple products, but they're not. They've got a lot of different complex components. I'll touch on in a minute. We had produced we have produced a prototype vegan leather batting pad that we took to the facility, and the production quality of our item was viewed as very high, but there is clearly a big cost differential between inverted commas vegan leather, Pinatex from pineapple, versus existing PU leather, which in a mainstream market makes the product cost ineffective. So what we also highlighted, we found that there were various tricks to the trade in making cricket gear that, despite us disassembling pads, reconstructing pads, some of the more difficult challenges we found were dealt with through sort of interesting learning by doing within the production process. So skilled producers. So we then went on to Mumbai, and we worked with a leading circular economy consultancy, or India's leading circular economy consultancy, and we disseminated further activities around the cricket gear, also repair cafes, with sort of interesting discussions. And then we finished with a discussion, an innovation discussion at Decathlon, at their cricket gear development unit, and as a result of that, that we are developing a collaboration and partnership that will be announced sometime, we hope, soon, to really look at circularity and cricket gear and moving that agenda forward. So what our conclusions are, particularly in the supply chain, none of this will be surprising to any of the manufacturers or outsourced, either the brands or the manufacturers. So the power is in the brands. Cost, innovation is costly, and unless that's driven by the brands, the outsourced manufacturers are unlikely to move forward their own direct product innovations. We found a much higher quality plastic cricket bats being produced for the Indian street market that we weren't aware of when we came to India. So almost sort of David Warner size edged bats that are being produced out of plastics that are being used in street cricket, which of course tape ball cricket and gully cricket is huge in India. And we also recognized that the workers had a lot of knowledge and different tools and approaches, and there were sort of tricks to the trade about making the pads and the clothing to a high quality manner. So I think maybe did I skip over something? Maybe. We going back, stepping back a little bit, and some of you who may have attended webinars in the past may be aware that we produced a refurbished cricket pair of cricket pads that built in some form of design for disassembly, which we received design rights for. Similarly, we've built on those original prototypes, and we refurbished, if you like, some pro pads and these were the pads we took to India and were in a sense reviewed by the makers, and despite our very small scale prototype development, the standard we achieved was a sort of a professional level in manufacturing. However, we have the cost differential, as I mentioned, in terms of a product to market, but we're thinking about different strategies on that at the moment. What we also done is we'd used a substitute for the chamois leather in inner gloves that had also been trialed by semi-professionals, and we have also achieved a design rights on this, and we are now doing one further innovation at the moment based on some of the feedback from a player to further improve the inner gloves. We had used a similar process to produce some batting gloves, but in testing for those batting gloves using the alternative materials, those materials are simply not fit for purpose, in batting with the friction of the hand against the bat. So those materials really didn't stand up and started to degrade after only a few hours of net practice. Our research has also indicated, and me as a sort of ex-player, not a professional, but a good standard league cricket player, is that many cricketers do repair their own gear and clothing in their own ad hoc manner, and there is repair activity that already goes on, both for gear and clothing. So we've done quite a significant amount of research amongst recreational players now, and that there was indications from that survey that 32% repaired their own bats, 17% repaired their own pads, 15% their own gloves, and 11% their own clothing. And some research further on it indicates that repair clothing also might be slightly higher. So there is activity going on. In terms of reuse, we embarked on some pilot projects last year, and these proved to produce some interesting results that we've now mainstreamed through a launch with Spencer Cricket Club. And this particular project really was looking at the idea of all of us who've played would know that there are often stored gear, cricket gear and clothing, that's maybe in the garage or the attic or the backs of clubs. And the idea was that if you put together a scheme and you ask people to donate to the scheme, this would be a great opportunity to redistribute, gear to potentially to state schools, to disadvantaged groups and disadvantaged individuals. So that was the sort of premise. And we set up this project in combination with a variety of different partners. And we piloted this with 2 clubs in and around Farnham and Spencer Cricket Club, the largest recreational club in the country, last year, 2024. And what we found was we had a mix of gear coming in, but 95% of the gear that came in was straight reusable. Some of it still in the bank, never used. Some of it's a few stains, bit of cleaning up, but a significant proportion could be reused straight. And at that stage last year, there was only a few reuse schemes in the UK. The only large one was Lord's Taverners Cricket Gear. They call it kit recycling scheme, but effectively it's a reuse scheme. But sadly, despite that project having significant impact with a large team, the Lord's Taverners decided to close that facility. So we've lost the reuse network for the UK. And literally, there was the announcements they were closing their doors in April, but they are finally closing their doors on the 25th of this month. So we will no longer have a cricket gear reuse scheme for the UK, which is a major shame given the impact they've had. For example, the distribution of gear to Brazil has really grown that market, and and also in other places around the world, and in the UK. So effectively, we set up the gear recycling scheme, and gear was donated that we vetted. We vetted out any of the gear that was damaged, and we did not redistribute helmets. So effectively, what we had in the project of Farnham, who rolled two clubs together, who effectively then we had a sort of day, we integrated into a sort of training day, the distribution of gear, and effectively parents came and collected gear. What we also did was to set up a parents with kids often, but what we also did was to arrange situations where a couple of state schools were able to collect gear for the own use of pupils, and also we were able to work with a club to kit out an Afghan refugee. So effectively, we collected over 500 items, and within that there was a split between the gear collected in the Farnham project and the Spencer project. Within the Farnham project, we were able to redistribute that directly to state schools and disadvantaged players. Approximately 50 to 60% of the gear was able to be redistributed. Within the Spencer project, due to some challenges within the system, we collected a significant amount of gear, but at that stage it was not able to be redistributed to the schools and the clubs. But as a result of that, Spencer decided to progress with the project. So effectively, and for time, I'll move through this a bit quickly, is that what we did with the Farnham project is we followed up with some social impact research. And what I should mention is that through other work we had done in other areas, we have developed a carbon calculator that we can identify the carbon savings associated with reuse. And that methodology has been further developed. So we were able to identify, the impact in terms of items redistributed, the landfill diversion, because we also have the weight of gear, and also the carbon savings. But what we also did was we tried to identify the social impact, and you can't read this, but essentially, there was some, although it wasn't a significant amount of feedback, there was some interesting points. The vast majority of the people had identified that they would engage in the scheme again. It gave by a young person having their own gear, even if it was reused, it gave the child more confidence and in the game, in having their own gear. But also there was a very interesting example of a lady, single parent, who came along to the Rowledge scheme, picked up some cricket gear for her son, and he was so enthusiastic about that. But also she felt she wasn't losing face by coming along and asking, so she could just select the gear. So that was important for her as well from a social point of view. So again, we were able to fully kit out an Afghan refugee who played for a team in Hampshire, who unfortunately not been able to had no gear because he'd traveled across Europe. So he was very happy with receiving that. So this has led to some ongoing discussions with Spencer, and Spencer, the largest recreational club in the country, has developed their own community scheme called Spencer One, working on community engagement through social benefits. and they're involved in a whole series of activities that they're looking to expand in the Wandsworth area. And what we found in our research is that actually, there's an important connection between cricket and communities. In that by engaging in cricket, people feel more connected to their local communities, and they build life skills. So as a result of all this discussion and our research, we've developed the Circular Cricket Gear Hub that was launched at Spencer on the 1st of July with the support of Surrey Cricket Foundation and Decathlon UK. And essentially, Spencer have now decided to mainstream the development of the hub. So it will run from April to September each year. This year it will conclude in September, but next year they'll run it throughout the full season. And what has also been developed within the project is we have developed a system, a dashboard system, where we can track the donations in and the donations out, the landfill savings and the carbon savings. And we have in this a what we call a wish list. So a state school can, for example, request various gear. We can then check that against our stock and then redistribute this, based on the stock availability. So this system is now built, and we're further optimizing this so we can track the gear in and out, and also the landfill savings and carbon savings through reuse. So there's been a building identified within Spencer that is in effect the physical hub there for the collection of gear that is started to be redistributed to disadvantaged people, schools, etc. And a trial has been set up with Spencer, with Decathlon UK in Wandsworth in the month of July, as part of their leadership around circularity. So that is now happening in Wandsworth as a sort of pilot. Indirectly, the other good news story is that Spencer had an inquiry from a new Afghan team and league in, I pronounce that right, Grieswalde in Germany. And in collaboration with the Lord's Taverners, as part of the closure of their scheme, we were able to redistribute about 50 plus items to that league to enable people to play the game. So again, the impact is wider even before it's fully launched. So there's a whole number of different benefits from integrating circularity into the use and production of cricket gear. And we're further developing ideas around a social enterprise to bring these ideas together, to integrate in different communities, and looking to build and submit a proposal to take this forward. So that's a sort of snapshot, and I'll now pass you across to my colleague Lillian, and we'll hopefully have sort of 15 minutes or so at the end for any questions or observations or further thoughts. So over to you, Lillian.
Thank you, Martin. Next slide, please. So a little bit of background for the cricket clothing project. We've mainly focused on this project primarily due to the impact of the clothing, fashion, textile industry. So globally, there are 92 million tons of textile waste generated each year. And so far, the sector has primarily been self-regulated. Next slide, please. And then this can be seen that equally the sports sector, the sports clothing and apparel sector, and then more specifically the cricket clothing sector, also contributes to the high numbers of textile waste. You can see here, this was a visit to Lord's Taverners recycling scheme, and There's a mix of sports clothing, but also cricket clothing, both used and new, as an outcome of surplus production of cricket clothing. Next slide, please. Again, during the visit to a clothing supplier in northern India, we identified that there was a clear approach on the process with a focus on quality checks, as well as compliance with ethical trading initiative standards, which were displayed throughout the manufacturing site. And these requirements are driven by brands. There's also mass customization in design and printing. And then in terms of clothing production, there was a 60% white, 40% coloured, although it is expected to shift to a 50-50 within 3 years. We also had, saw that the use of offcuts are being used for industrial symbiosis. So for example, for stuffing boxing bags, there's a consideration of AI applications. And then the use of both recycled PE pellets and also virgin polyester is sourced from India, so the value chain is local in that sense. Next slide, please. So in terms of the objectives of the product sustainability circularity policy tool for cricket clothing project was to identify product related life cycle information, data or issues related to existing and forthcoming policy, assess the implications of existing and forthcoming policy and legislation for the cricket clothing and apparel sector in particular, provide guidance on how to implement product-specific circularity strategies that align to these identified policy and legislative requirements, and to feed learnings and findings into other sectors, so the broader sports clothing and apparel sector. Next slide, please. In terms of the cricket clothing segmentation, the market for cricket clothing is divided into children, youth, and adult, both male and female. It is divided further into white and coloured clothing. And then the focus for this project has been on cricket shirts, trousers, and jumpers, although we are aware that there are additional items such as socks, sun hats, and caps. Next slide, please. In terms of material considerations in relation to circularity and cricket clothing, the majority of the items, so cricket shirts and trousers, are made from virgin polyester, as well as a mix of fibres, so polyester and elastane, for example. And then the jumpers are primarily acrylic or polyester, as well as wool. There are printing limitations and performance demands that limit the use of the materials for cricket clothing and apparel. And then coloured clothing requires sublimation printing, which requires a high percentage of polyester. Next slide, please. In terms of the use phase considerations, it is unknown how long players usually use their cricket clothing. However, we have some early indications that we will present further in a 500+ sample survey that was conducted with recreational players. The changes in sponsorship and players require teams to update their clothing more frequently, which leads to the early disposal of cricket clothing. There is also little guidance on how to care for the cricket clothing. However, based on a previous survey conducted, 82% of recreational players indicated to regularly read and follow care instructions for clothing. So again, issues around labelling cricket clothing could be a way forward to prolong the use life of cricket clothing. In terms of white clothing, this stains easily, which results in potentially early disposal and also hinders reuse. So a lot of the clothing that was donated to the Lord's Taverners, for example, had minor coffee stains or grass stains, and therefore it was deemed that end of life. In terms of repairing cricket clothing, again from a previous survey, 506 players, 11% indicated to have previously repaired their clothing. And there are also overproduction issues. So the visit to Lord Taverner's cricket kit recycling programme showed large quantities of unsold or surplus cricket clothing, which is often a mismatch between production and demand. Next slide, please. So here we have started to map out the cricket clothing value chain, as you can see, from resource extraction to design, manufacture, retail, first use, and then there's end of first use, end of first life, second use, and then end of second life. And the idea here is to map out the various stakeholders that are relevant across the value chain, and also to identify at which stage do we need to implement the circular design strategies, as well as compliance with policy and legislation. Next slide, please. Now, in terms of market data for cricket clothing and apparel, there is limited market data in the UK. The supply chain is also unclear, and there is a lack of transparency. Cricket clothing is mainly assumed to be produced in India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh. Next slide, please. However, we have, as part of our research, we have started to estimate some of the market data in relation to cricket clothing and apparel. Now, just a caveat to this, this is based largely on assumptions. However, these are one of the first figures around the estimated production, as well as CO2 carbon emission calculations for the sector. So based on the ECB estimating that there are around 300 regular adult participants, with 2 million recreational, school, youth and club affiliated cricket players. It is estimated that the average player spends between £75 and £120 per year on clothing. Now, this is validated as well with the surveys conducted, so we'll look into this in detail in the next couple of slides. These numbers are based on an average from low to mid-range items across various retailers. So here we can assume that on average, each player pays around £25 per item. Now, in 2023, the European cricket gear and apparel market was estimated to be around £251 million, with the UK market representing 95% of these sales. Now, if we assume that cricket clothing makes up of 61% of the total revenue of cricket clothing, this would equate to the apparel share of the overall market being valued at 150 million. And if the market value of 150 million is divided by the average price assumptions of £25 per item, the total number of items sold would be approximately 6 million items. Now, this is focusing only on shirts, trousers and jumpers. So there will be certain variations in these numbers. Next slide, please. So with this in mind, first estimate around the CO2 emissions, we have calculated, taking into account the 6 million cricket clothing items, which equates to approximately 1,920 metric tons of material. A conservative average suggests that CO2 emissions per kilogram of polyester fabric, now this is cradle to gate, to be equivalent to 20 kilograms of CO2 emissions, that's per kilo. So if we have 1.92 million kilograms of material times the 20 kilograms CO2 emissions per kilogram of fabric, this would equate to 38.4 million kilograms of CO2 annual emissions related to the cricket clothing and apparel market in England and Wales. this is assuming, well, this is only taking into account shirts, trousers, and jumpers, and then assuming that this is we're only using virgin polyester fabric. So again, there will be variations in terms of a certain percentage of the jumpers being made from wool, and then other materials as well. But then, yeah, so we're still looking into these numbers. Next slide, please. Now, moving on to the textiles policy landscape. As mentioned previously, 98% of the cricket clothing is sold within England and Wales. So focusing on UK textiles policy landscape. Some of the EU laws still apply within the UK until they're replaced, revoked, or expired. And further developments may still mirror or contain elements of EU regulations, which is why we're also monitoring closely EU legislation developments. So, for example, the Waste Framework Directive is still a retained EU law post-Brexit, and therefore it is recommended that cricket clothing and manufacturers stay up to date on these relevant legislative developments. Now, in terms of, for example, EPR schemes, UKFT, the UK Fashion and Textile Association, is exploring EPR implications. And while the UK currently lacks a EPR specific for textiles, the UK government intends to introduce one. This is evidenced by, for example, DEFRA was expected to open a public consultation on textiles by the end of 2024. However, this did not go ahead, but it is gaining strong support across the UK and textile sector. Other UK legislation relevant to cricket clothing and apparel is the Product Safety and Labelling Regulations, as well as the UK Green Claims Code, which is a legally enforced guidance to prevent greenwashing. Next slide, please. So with this in mind, we're monitoring closely a series of EU policy and legislation. However, we have selected these 6 EU policies which are relevant to the sector. Now, I won't go into too much detail around these, but just to keep them in mind and to monitor as some of these elements may be introduced or could be introduced into UK policy and legislation. Next slide, please. And then monitoring these various policies, for example, the Dutch and the French EPR for textiles, they include specific notes around sports and clothing. Next slide, please. So again, within the French EPR, there's a subcategory that specifically details sports clothing, which may be integrated into further EPR schemes. Next slide, please. So in terms of recommendations for cricket clothing and apparel companies, if selling into the EU market, to review marketing materials, ensure sustainability claims are traceable and evidence-based, adjust legal and commercial practices with EU standards, also look into improving inventory practices that may also reduce overproduction of cricket clothing and apparel companies, as for example, the Waste Framework Directive is still part of UK legislation. In terms of product circularity, so product design innovations can start to focus on durability, repairability, and recyclability, and then further recommended areas of focus for manufacturers to audit current fiber composition, map product origin and product production chains, verify material sourcing, specifically for animal-based materials. Next slide, please. Also, there's an incentive to localize recycling. So, for example, develop domestic take-back and recycling schemes. And then, begin to prepare for end-of-life textile management with potential EPR compliance. So monitor product returns, unsold stock, and engage with various stakeholders across the value chain. So focusing primarily on data collection, tracking material origins, and supply chain accountability and eco-design practices. Next slide, please. So now we're going to move on to some of the early findings from a recreational player survey with 510 respondents within England and Wales. Next slide, please. So so the survey was designed to collect the responses from a 50% gender split. The age range was divided into the following groups. So you can see that the majority of the responses were from ranged from 26 to 35-year-olds, with over 45-year-olds only representing 19% of the 510 respondents. The survey indicated that 68% of the respondents play between 5 and 15 games per year. Next slide, please. In terms of purchasing habits, 46% of respondents indicated to purchase some cricket gear clothing online via an established high street retailer, while 29% indicated to purchase all or some via independent cricket stores or directly through clubs. 42% of respondents indicated to spend between £75 and £100, which is quite similar to, well, which verifies the numbers used for calculating the market share and also CO2 emissions, and 29% indicated to spend over £100. And then 52% of respondents indicated to play in white. So again, it's a 50-50, well, it's 50-50 split between coloured clothing and white clothing. Next slide, please. In terms of so we looked into the use phase considerations for shirts, trousers and jumpers. So in terms of the shirts, 37% of respondents indicated to own 3 shirts, while 30% indicated to own more than 3 shirts. In terms of the product lifetime, 43% indicated to keep shirts for 2 years. And then the main reason for disposing of cricket shirts is due to stains, with 50% of respondents selecting both grass stains, but also other types of stains like tea, coffee, so on, sweat stains. As for trousers, 38% of the respondents indicated that they own 2 pairs of trousers, while 27% own 3. 44% indicated to keep the trousers for at least 2 years. So we're seeing that product lifetime appears to be slightly higher than anticipated. Product end of life, most trousers are disposed primarily due to grass stains, as indicated by 68% of respondents. Next slide, please. As for jumpers, 35% of participants indicated to own 2 jumpers, and then 38% of respondents indicated that they kept their jumpers for 2 years, while 36% indicated to keep jumpers for over 3 years. So we're seeing higher numbers in terms of keeping the jumpers for longer compared to trousers and shirts. And then reasons for disposing of the jumpers appears to be slightly more diverse, which includes a balance of stains, tears, and changes in sponsorship. Next slide, please. So moving on to end of first life and extension strategies. We identified that cricket clothing is either donated or disposed of in textile recycling bins. 77% of respondents indicated to base their purchase decisions on materials rather than price. Again, quite high numbers in terms of repairing, so either paid for or self-repair. So 73% of respondents indicated to have previously repaired cricket clothing. And then from the 73% that indicated to have repaired their cricket clothing, the main item being repaired are trousers. So 50% of that 73 have repaired trousers. And then again, survey highlighted that there's a 50-50 split for the acceptance of rental models for cricket gear, which was surprisingly higher than expected. And then for the 50% of respondents that indicated to not consider a rental model for cricket gear, the main reasons are due to the high costs of rental models and also a desire to own their cricket clothing. However, when asked about rental models for kids or youth cricket, 77% of parents would consider trialling a rental model for children cricket clothing. So this is an area to be explored further. Next slide, please. So in terms of conclusions from policy and legislation part of the project, some EU laws still apply in the UK until they're replaced, and UK legislation may still mirror or contain elements of EU regulation. So we recommend that cricket clothing manufacturers stay updated on relevant legislative developments. In terms of potential design innovations, these include material substitution to replace the use of virgin polyester, use of single materials to facilitate recycling, investment in technology to replace logos and sponsorships rather than the early disposal of clothing, as well as design for disassembly to replace, for example, torn or stained parts and components. Then regarding the player survey, the early results indicate that clothing is kept for slightly longer than anticipated, so between 2 years or over. There are higher levels of repair than anticipated, so this is for self-repair and paid for services. And there are higher levels of acceptance of rental models for cricket clothing than anticipated. And this is even higher for children's and youth clothing. And then, yeah, we can open up to questions. And yeah.
Great, thanks very much, Lillian. Do we have any questions? Does anybody want to kick off? Any observations? Do we think we missed something out? Is there something that particularly stood out? Is something you disagree with? You know, any feedback would be great.
I've got a few points, if that's okay. Really interesting presentation, a lot of information in there. Extremely interesting and valuable. Few points from me, Liam Burns from New Balance Cricket. I think the recycling scheme is a great idea, and I guess as part of your research, you've flagged that cricket has become a more expensive sport in recent years, and you know those costs can be prohibitive for players and parents. One thing that we've wondered whether clubs will go back to is the era of clubs and schools having kit bags. And I think the recycling scheme is great, but I wondered whether there's an opportunity to recycle in bundles rather to individuals by getting particularly junior equipment together in kit bags and sending those to schools and clubs who would welcome receipt of that, rather than just individuals, was one observation. And then to do that, I guess you'd need large bags, and then you can bundle up equipment and perhaps get through that quicker and more effectively, than just dealing with individuals. So on the clothing side, it looks like the clothing research is very much, understandably, but focused on purely playing clothing, which is obviously only one small part of the clothing that is sold in cricket, because obviously clubs and players buy training wear. Even at club level, a lot of that is badged up for clubs. So not only do players buy whites and coloured clothing to play cricket, they're also buying training wear as well. And obviously there's a huge volume of fan wear and replica, particularly around county clubs and England. So the figures that you've probably looked at is only perhaps a small number than the overall picture in terms of all cricket clothing that's purchased. That said, and having managed the England kit deal for 5 years when we as New Balance had that, I'm interested in the cricket figures of the size of the cricket market in the UK. It is difficult to get information, I accept